This boy wasn't actually thirsty at all, but he still desperately crawled toward the water's edge. As soon as he reached out his hand into the water, the wound on his hand began to heal at an incredible speed, visible to the naked eye. He even gained an extraordinary superpower as a result. Whenever danger approached, all he had to do was gently wave his hand, and nearby water sources would transform into towering waves hundreds of meters high. However, even he didn't know that he was the illegitimate son of Poseidon, the sea god. It is said that there are three major gods in the world: Zeus, the god of the sky; Poseidon, the god of the sea; and Hades, the god of the underworld. Under their rule, no war had occurred for over 100 years, but peaceful times are always dull, and these gods would secretly descend to Earth. After falling in love with humans, they would have half-human, half-god children. Percy was the son of Poseidon and a mortal woman. Though he had never met his father, he had shown remarkable talent since childhood. He could hold his breath underwater for over 10 hours, which amazed his friends. One day, the school arranged a visit to the Temple of the Gods Museum, but the homeroom teacher suddenly called him into a room. Percy reluctantly followed the teacher, unaware that his destiny was about to change forever. As soon as he entered the room, the teacher behind him suddenly appeared on a 10-meter-high shelf, transformed into the vengeful goddess, and began to attack him. At this critical moment, his friends and the museum curator suddenly arrived. Under the curator's intimidation, the vengeful goddess finally fled in panic. It turned out that a few days earlier, Zeus's thunderbolt had been stolen, and there were malicious rumors claiming that Poseidon's son was the thief. Zeus threatened Poseidon that if the thunderbolt was not returned within 14 days, not only would Percy be cast into hell, but Poseidon would also face war. In order to protect Percy, Poseidon sent two guardians. What Percy couldn't have anticipated was that the good friends he spent every day with had actually become his guardians. At this point, the curator, unable to explain further, handed Percy a pen. Since Percy's identity had been exposed, the only solution was to send him to the Half-Blood Academy for protection. His friends immediately took action. They first returned to Percy's home, grabbed his mother, and fled quickly. On the way, his mother finally revealed the truth about his origin, but Percy still felt no affection for the father he had never met. Seeing his reaction, his mother quickly explained that his father hadn't wanted to leave them. However, Zeus had already decreed that no god was allowed to contact their children in the mortal world. Before his mother could finish speaking, a bull suddenly descended from the sky. After the whirlwind, the group managed to regain their senses, but Percy suddenly saw hundreds of bulls charging toward them. In a desperate moment, his friend quickly removed his pants, revealing his half-goat identity, and with one powerful kick, shattered the car window. The Minotaur was getting closer, and the three of them fled for their lives, eventually making it to the Half-Blood Academy. But Percy's human mother couldn't enter the academy. The Minotaur grabbed her, and with a single squeeze, turned her to ashes. Filled with rage, Percy momentarily forgot his fear, but the disparity in strength was too great, and he was knocked flying by a single blow. The Minotaur charged toward Percy. Just as it was about to strike, Percy dodged, and the Minotaur crashed into a large tree, its horns getting stuck. After a difficult struggle, Percy broke free, tore off one of the Minotaur's horns, and drove it into the creature's heart, killing it. However, Percy was overcome with grief and fainted. He slept for 3 whole days. When he awoke, he thought everything might have been a dream, but when he saw his friend's goat legs, he immediately realized it was all real. His mother had truly been killed by the Minotaur. After the sorrow, Percy made a firm decision. He would seek justice from Zeus. But before that, he had to undergo training at the Half-Blood Academy to avenge his mother. During his time at the academy, Percy became deeply captivated by a beautiful figure, Annabeth, the daughter of Athena, the goddess of war. It was because he looked at her a little too long in the crowd that poor Percy endured so much hardship. During a training session, the two quickly came to blows as opponents. At first, they fought back and forth, but soon Percy was utterly defeated by Annabeth. Just as everyone mocked him for his arrogance, a mysterious voice suddenly echoed in Percy's ear.
Go to the water. The water will give you power.
Following the voice's guidance, Percy struggled to stretch his hand into the water, and the clear water quickly healed all his wounds. When he stood up again, he felt an overwhelming surge of power. With a few swift moves, he defeated his opponents and then crushed Annabeth, capturing the girl's heart in the process. That night, while they celebrated their victory, the once peaceful bonfire suddenly erupted. The god of the underworld, Hades, appeared in the mortal world. and with a wave of his hand, hellfire set the scene ablaze. Then he got straight to the point. In fact, Percy's mother was not dead. If Percy could deliver the thunderbolt to the Lord of the Underworld, Hades, he could bring his mother back to the mortal world. Although Percy didn't know the whereabouts of the thunderbolt, he had to try to save his mother. So, while everyone was asleep, Percy planned to leave the academy alone, but his friends and Annabeth suddenly appeared, deciding to help him. At Annabeth's suggestion, the three of them found Luke, the descendant of the messenger god, who was the only one who knew the entrance to the underworld. Entering the underworld was easy, but the real challenge was how to leave alive. They needed to find 3 green pearls to safely exit the underworld. With that, Luke handed Percy a pair of flying shoes and a cool shield. The next day, the trio followed the map to the location of the first green pearl, which turned out to be a rundown antique shop full of eerie statues. Percy's friend was shocked to find that one of the statues looked strikingly similar to his uncle, with the same birthmark on his forehead. Remembering how his uncle had died, his friend panicked, immediately realizing this was Medusa's lair. As Medusa removed her sunglasses, they all hurriedly closed their eyes. A woman who had merely glanced at Medusa turned to stone in the next instant. Medusa continued to try to tempt them to open their eyes, but Percy cleverly used his phone's reflection to decapitate her. He then took the first green pearl from her wrist. He didn't waste Medusa's head either, as it might be useful in future battles. The second green pearl was located on a statue of Athena, but there were tourists everywhere, so the three of them had to hide in the restroom, waiting until midnight when the place was deserted. Percy put on the flying shoes, sprinted, and easily retrieved the pearl from the statue. This mission seemed straightforward, but as they were about to leave, the statue's caretaker suddenly appeared. To their surprise, the caretaker transformed from a normal person into a 9-headed serpent, and they fled in panic. Percy tried to use his shield to defend, but the flames were too hot, and the shield almost burned him to a crisp. Fortunately, there was a nearby water pool, and Percy had a brilliant idea. He gathered the water and created a barrier, temporarily keeping the 9-headed serpent at bay. However, Percy was not yet a true sea god, and the serpent broke through the barrier. Just as things seemed hopeless, Percy's friend took Medusa's head and used her petrifying gaze on the serpent. The museum now had a large stone statue of the 9-headed serpent. Fearing further complications, the three quickly moved on to the next location. The third green pearl was located in the gambling city of Las Vegas. As soon as they entered, the staff stopped them and invited them to try some of the local pastries. They ate without suspicion, but if they had heard the saying "there's no such thing as a free lunch," they would have known better. The pastries were enchanted, causing them to slip into a state of endless pleasure and hallucinations. Luckily, at a crucial moment, the mysterious voice reappeared. Percy quickly woke up, called out to his friend and Annabeth, and they successfully obtained the third pearl. However, casino staff soon noticed them, and they quickly grabbed a supercar parked outside the casino and sped off. With the help of the supercar, they managed to shorten the originally 8-hour journey to just 3 hours, quickly locating the entrance to the underworld. After bribing the ferryman, they followed the river Styx to find Hades. Hades greeted his nephew enthusiastically, urging him to hand over the thunderbolt. With the thunderbolt, Hades believed he could defeat his brother, Zeus, take control of Olympus, and escape the dreariness of the underworld. Percy quickly explained that he hadn't stolen the thunderbolt, but this only enraged Hades further. As Hades shattered the soul, Percy's mother's image began to appear. Percy immediately dropped his shield and rushed to his mother. However, the Lord of the Underworld noticed the thunderbolt hidden within the shield's compartment. It turned out that Luke, the descendant of the messenger god, had masterminded everything. He had planned to instigate a war among the gods and overthrow them to take their place. Hades, however, was unaware of Luke's plot. When he seized the thunderbolt, he was about to throw the three into the deepest pits of hell. Just then, Persephone, Hades' wife, snatched the thunderbolt from him, sending Hades flying. Persephone had long grown tired of Hades' cruelty, and the coming war among the gods would cause much suffering. She handed the thunderbolt to Percy, telling him to stop Zeus on Mount Olympus. But just as Percy and his friends were about to leave, they realized that after rescuing Percy's mother, they had become 4 people, but only 3 green pearls. This meant one person had to stay behind. Initially, Percy was willing to stay, but his friend, as his guardian, decided to sacrifice himself. Percy vowed to find a way to rescue him later. Then, he shattered the last green pearl and headed to Olympus, unable to imagine what his friend would endure. Meanwhile, Percy and his friends arrived at the entrance to Olympus. Luke, who had been preparing for this moment, suddenly appeared and kicked Percy away. then seized the thunderbolt. With the thunderbolt in his possession, Luke's powers grew, and he easily overwhelmed the three of them. At the critical moment, Percy summoned the power of the sea god within him. The surrounding water tanks exploded, forming a massive tidal wave. Luke attempted to resist, but Percy used a water dragon technique to drown him instantly. Once the water receded, Luke, still defiant, tried to resist again. Percy summoned Poseidon's trident and with one powerful strike, sent Luke into the sea. However, an even greater crisis loomed. With only 2 minutes left before the time agreed upon by Zeus and Poseidon, the gods were already arguing uncontrollably on Olympus. Poseidon and Athena tried desperately to reason with Zeus, but the stubborn Zeus ignored them. The war among the gods seemed imminent. Just as Zeus was about to declare war, Percy's voice rang out. He handed Zeus the thunderbolt and revealed the truth about the situation. Zeus finally realized that he had misunderstood Percy. To make amends, Zeus agreed to rescue Percy's friend from the underworld and granted Poseidon and Percy a private audience. In the end, Percy forgave his father for leaving them, and the father and son were reconciled. When Percy returned to the academy, his friend had been mercilessly rescued by Zeus. Percy and Annabeth also began their happily ever after.